Slam Dunk is the greatest sports manga ever made. Its main focus, as its name suggests, is of course basketball. I highly recommend it if you haven't read it already. The main character of Slam Dunk is Sakuragi, and he is the most naturally gifted player in the entire manga. With only a few weeks of practice, he became one of the best power forwards in high school, if not arguably the best. So let's take a deep dive into how Sakuragi would have progressed if he had started basketball just a little bit earlier. The earliest point Sakuragi could have taken up basketball would be middle school, for a similar reason as high school, to pick up girls. Sakuragi, in his first year of middle school, around the first day, would try to get girls from his school but would constantly get rejected. But he would notice something interesting. The girls that were rejecting him had quite the interest in the basketball team. This would inspire Sakuragi to join, and his height would make it no challenge to get into the team. Since most people learn to play basketball around middle school, that would mean Sakuragi wouldn't be the only beginner on his team, giving him a good opportunity to learn all the basics of basketball without the added pressure of having already advanced players on his team. Sakuragi's coach would immediately notice Sakuragi's incredible athleticism. Sakuragi would learn the basics and quickly start becoming his team's key player. But problems would start anytime Sakuragi played any competent team. Sakuragi's attitude and aggressive nature would cause him to concede a lot of fouls and even sometimes get into fights without a strong team captain like Agaki to tell Sakuragi how to manage his temper. Sakuragi would miss his first middle school tournament due to suspension, but this would turn out to be the wake-up call that Sakuragi needed to ignite his love but also respect for basketball. Not being allowed to play would force him to realize he needs to actually improve his game and work hard. Sakuragi wouldn't lose his fiery personality but would use it more appropriately. But without Agaki guiding Sakuragi, he would struggle to understand the concepts of defense. His teammates and coach would help him as well as experience, but he wouldn't get that elite coaching later received from Agaki. Even so, by the end of his second year in middle school, he would be one of the best defensive players in middle school, thanks to his talent, of course, and experience, due to him playing a majority of his team games. Once Sakuragi had a good grasp on the basics of basketball, he would be a lot better in all areas of his game. He would make a lot less mistakes. He would be a well-rounded player who could shoot from mid-range and had the occasional long-range shot. His passing would be solid. His ball handling would be good enough to where it would be difficult to get the ball off of him, but he wouldn't be expected to dribble through a defense every single play. But his defense is where he would shine. He would get almost every single rebound and block most shots. In Sakuragi's final year of middle school, this is where his famous rivalry with Rokawa would finally begin. Even though Sakuragi was one of the best players in middle school, his team had never won any tournaments. This was due to the fact that he was his team's entire game plan by his final year, which was effective against weak teams, but strong teams would draw out fouls from Sakuragi and use his aggressive playstyle against him. Sakuragi didn't mind it too much because in his mind it was as simple as he's a great player on a mediocre team. But this was until he met Rokawa in his final middle school tournament. This would be the first time that Sakuragi was blatantly outclassed. Rokawa would completely dominate Sakuragi in every aspect of the game. He made Sakuragi look like this was his first ever middle school game. I know I mentioned Sakuragi is the most talented player, but Rokawa is not far behind. Also, he started playing basketball a lot younger than Sakuragi. So even though Sakuragi has a little bit more talent, Rokawa has a lot more experience over him. And without a talented team around him and an experienced center like Agaki to guide him, Sakuragi would still be missing that last piece of development, leading him to being completely beaten by Rokawa and his team. But all of that would completely change in high school. Sakuragi would of course be scouted by strong teams such as Ryanen, but he would opt to join the same school as his delinquent friend. Sakuragi would still meet and befriend Haruko on his first day, and his first day of school, as opposed to how it actually went in the original manga, would have a lot less friction. He wouldn't challenge Agaki or fight with Rokawa. Sakuragi would join the basketball team with no issue him and Agaki would get along well, and even though he didn't like Roikawa as a person per se, he understood how good of a player he was. And Roikawa had a similar feeling towards Sakuragi, so there was a mutual respect between the two. The basketball team would have their first practice and the two freshmen would immediately impress. This would prompt Agaki to start a practice match between the freshmen and the seniors. Initially, Sakuragi and Roikawa would get in each other's way, not really wanting to pass to each other, making it easy for Agaki to defend, but once they started to build a little chemistry and the passes started flowing between them, they would begin to dominate the practice match, leading to the freshmen beating the seniors. Agaki would be beyond overjoyed. Still being stoic in demeanor, he knew with these two he had a real chance of winning nationals. Coach Anzai would announce the practice match he had set up against Ryonen, which would prompt Shihoku to start having more intense training sessions in preparation. Agaki would start having one-on-one training sessions with Sakuragi, helping him work on some flaws he noticed in his defense. After about a week, the day for the practice match would arrive. The match would start with Sendo casually controlling the game, making a lot of great passes, but Shohoku would gradually start tightening up their defense. Sendo would have a tough time with both Agaki and Sakuragi starting to shut him down. The first half would end in a 50-50 tie. In the second half, Shohoku would begin to dominate the game, having both Roikawa and Sakuragi guarding Sendo. This would work fairly well, with the match ending with a 15-point lead to Shohoku. Shohoku wouldn't celebrate for too long as they had their sights set on the upcoming regional tournament. In the following week, both Miyagi and Mitsui would rejoin the basketball team after a lot of fighting. The Kanagawa tournament would eventually start and Shohoku's first match would be against Miuradai, which they would completely dominate, with Shohoku winning their first match. The following 3 tournament matches for Shohoku would be a complete cakewalk as they made it all the way to the quarterfinals, where they would face their first test in Shoyo. Shoyo being a powerhouse team with only senior players. Though it'd be a tough game, Shohoku would get it done. The semi-finals would be a round robin setup, with each team playing against each other and the best team, well, the best 2 teams, making it to nationals. Shohoku's next opponent was Kainen, a team that has made it to nationals 16 years in a row. Fair to say Shohoku was the favorite to lose this match by a lot, this Kainen being considered to have currently its strongest team in its history. But the same could be said about Shohoku. The beginning of the match would see both teams on equal footing, with Maki and Sakuragi being standout performers, Maki making some great blocks and Sakuragi being a complete nightmare for Kanan to defend against. Shohoku would actually begin to develop a 10-point lead, with Kanan's players having a tough time trying to defend both Sakuragi and Roikawa. Towards the end of the second quarter, Shohoku would suffer a major setback, with Agaki spraining his ankle. Though initially Agaki was willing to play through the pain to help his team, Sakuragi would assure his captain that he would handle the center position. Sakuragi would suffocate Kainen's offense. It wasn't just his athleticism and defensive game that was giving Kainen so many problems, it was also his stamina. You would be forgiven for thinking he had a third lung. The way he was running up and down the court, getting every single rebound, blocking or attempting to block every single shot. He just did not run out of stamina, which waned on Kainen's morale as they watched this guy completely box in their offense. Roikawa, seeing Sakuragi playing with so much determination, would also begin to up his tempo, and Maki would look silly trying to guard him. Roikawa would be shredding through Kainen's defense. They were favorites to win against Shohoku, but they would lose the game by 8 points. Shohoku was just too much for them. Shohoku's next match against Takezato would be a complete blowout and Shohoku would win by 40 points. Coach Anzai would have health complications leading up to the Ryonen game, leading him to the hospital and Shohoku without their coach for the whole game. The game would be rough for Shohoku, with Ryonen having a new explosive player, as well as Agaki not playing up to his standards due to fear of re-injury. By the end of the first half, Ryonen was leading by 20 points. The second half, Sakuragi would help Agaki regain his confidence. Both Raikawa and Sakuragi would now start scoring more points, developing a lead on Ryonen and eventually winning the game. This would conclude the Kanagawa tournament, with Kainan and Shohoku going through to nationals. In the month or so leading up to nationals, Shohoku would travel to Josei High School to help them practice for nationals. Everyone besides Sakuragi would go. Sakuragi would personally train with coach Anzai, Anzai recognizing that Sakuragi had a weakness in his game, that being his poor tactical understanding. So far, Sakuragi's decision making was just too one-dimensional. It was clear that all Sakuragi thought was, if he gets the most rebounds, blocks the most shots, and scores as much as he can, his team will probably win, which is not incorrect, but he only thought of himself. This approach has only been effective because nobody in his prefecture can match him in sheer athleticism and raw ability, but it would not be enough to win nationals. So Anzai would spend the whole month teaching him how to incorporate strategy in his game. Eventually the time for nationals would arrive and the 52 teams would be present. Shohoku would be on the same side of the bracket as tournament favorites and reigning national champions Sainon, having to face them in the semi-finals if they progress, and they would progress, facing fairly easy competition on the way to the semi-finals. Shohoku would be confident in their chances to win nationals, having made it this far, but once they began studying Sainon's game footage, they would be brought back to earth. Sainon having already beat Kainan in the second round by a 30-point lead, Shohoku would prepare themselves for a tough game. The game would start off even, but once the second half started, Sainon would begin targeting Miyagi, which initially would work well, Miyagi struggling against the opposition point guard, but Miyagi would begin to adapt his game, making more intricate passes and sharper dribbles. As Shohoku started getting back into this game, Sawakite, the #1 ranked high school player in Japan, would begin to do things with a basketball that truly seemed physically impossible, scoring points for fun and getting his team a 16-point lead with 2 minutes left in the fourth quarter. But thankfully for Shohoku, Sakuragi would come alive, catching every single rebound. Shohoku would take this opportunity and use every single last drop of stamina to stop Sainon, and thanks to an MVP performance by Sakuragi, Shohoku would beat Sainon, winning the semi-finals and eventually winning nationals. Shohoku's pictures would be all over the local newspapers. Sakuragi would be considered one of Japan's best up-and-coming players, joining Raikawa as one of the few players chosen for Japan's youth national team. With Sakuragi's potential, the sky's the limit for how far he can make it in basketball. He might even find himself in the NBA. But that will do it for me today. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope you have a lovely rest of your day. If you want to catch Slam Dunk, Toei uploaded all the episodes on YouTube. I'll put the link in my description.